first official lesson in our Intro to Kotlin tutorial. Before we get started with the actual lesson, just going to go on a bit of a preamble here. So as you can see, I've started up a new Android Studio project. We're going to be using Kotlin, and I've also added 5 text files within this text package. Now, you will be provided with these so you don't have to write anything to them. What I'm going to do is at the end of each of the 5 major topics, move all of the code that we wrote to these text files so that we can start from a clean slate and so that you have the source code. As well, we're going to be working mostly in main-activity.kt until pretty much we get to the classes and object section. One other thing to note is that this is only an hour-long tutorial, or might be a little bit over an hour. So that means I'm not going to go into great depth into a lot of the topics just because we don't have a ton of time. I'm focused on getting you up to speed with the basics and syntax so that you can go out there and start developing apps as soon as possible. Also, we're not going to be running this stuff, this tutorial or this project a bunch of times. If you do want to go ahead and run stuff and print out values, you'll have to use what are called log statements. So if you start by typing log, it will add the import up here. So you do a log.d, then you provide some kind of a tag and then the actual value you want to print out on the right hand side. Note that it has to be in a string format, which means you'll have to convert any values you want to print to strings. Okay, this is just there for reference, just so you know what's going on. So let's get back to the topic at hand. This is going to be variables. That's our first major topic, and we're going to break this into a few parts. So this first part will just focus on exploring the basic variable types, such as the primitive types and strings, and we're going to focus on how to set them up and how to use them in our code. So switching back to main activity, the first thing we want to understand is the syntax. So to set a variable or constant up, we start by typing val or var. This denotes a constant whose value cannot change. Variables can change over time. We'll have the name, colon, and then the type, and then equals some kind of a value. So no semicolon needed, and also the type is optional, but we should include it where possible. This can, of course, be broken into 2 steps where we have the name and the type, and this is the declaration, and then the initialization here, in which case this takes on some kind of a default value depending on the type that we assign. Now, although there are more types than we'll study here, we're going to focus on several of the primitive types and then, of course, strings as well. So we'll take a look at ints, we'll take a look at floats and doubles. These are going to be numerical types. We'll also focus on booleans, characters or chars in Kotlin, and we'll finally finish up with strings. Now, integers are just whole numbers, floats and doubles are decimal numbers, booleans are true or false values, so they can only take on either the value of true or false. Characters are basically any 1-digit character, so it can represent numbers, letters or symbols, anything that is on the Unicode character set. And also we'll have strings, which are basically anything between 2 double quotes. They're perfect for text, messages or names within our code. So we'll take a look at just a couple of examples, or one example of each, and then we can move on to the next section. So I'll let you guys practice a bit afterwards. So a good place for an integer, anywhere we might want to store a whole number, would be representing a date, for example. So today's date, we might want to create a val for that. Today's date of type int is going to be maybe equal to, I think it's the 27th today. So note that this is a constant and the value cannot change afterwards, so we can set this as 28 later, and the date probably will change at some point, so we're going to want this to be a variable instead of a val, but that's essentially how you use it. Something a bit more appropriate for a val might be something like days in March, okay? And then this might be 31, because there are 31 days in March. Again, of type int, although note that if I excluded it, that is also perfectly valid. Okay, so those are integers, they're just whole numbers. Decimal numbers are represented by floats or doubles. So a good place for this might be something to do with money. So we could have bank balances, item costs, so on and so forth. Let's just go with a bank balance for now. Okay, and let's start by exploring floats. So let's say maybe we have $500.50 in our bank account. So what is the error here? Well, the fact is, in Kotlin, when we're using floats, we have to use the f, even though we've explicitly told the compiler we're dealing with a float. The reason is, it interprets any decimal numbers without the f as being doubles. Okay, so if I did something like, let's say, actually, let's make this val, item cost of a type double, and I set this equal to maybe $100.99. Note there is no error here, because decimal numbers are doubles, and only become floats if we stick the f onto the end of it. We can also use whole numbers this way, as long as we include the f there, okay? So fairly straightforward. Now Booleans are perhaps the simplest type of all. They're just true or false values and are used to generally answer a question, is something true? So is a light on? Is a door open? Something that could be answered with a yes or no or true or false. So for example, is door open? Of type Boolean might be set to false if the door is closed and might be set to true if the door is open. Okay, fairly straightforward. Now characters, I find myself not using too often, because we have the more powerful string type, and so, but we should probably still cover them anyway. A character, actually let's make this a val, space, character, of type character or char for short, might be equal to, let's say, a space. Okay, the space is also a perfectly valid character. As long as it's between these single quotes, it is a character, and as long as it has the length of only one. So if I type something else, then it's no longer valid. Okay, can also represent numbers, letters, symbols, whatever we'd like. So, like I said, we don't use characters too often because we have strings which are much more powerful. So a good place for a string might be something like a name. So let's say first name of type string is equal to, and then I'll put my first name here. So strings have variable lengths. They can take on any length we want. They can also take on the length of 0 and can importantly take on the value of null. Well, assuming they are nullable variables. But I'll save nullable variables for a different section. Okay, it's important to note that strings have a variety of operations that we can perform on them. So if you type the name of the string dot, then you'll get a list of all of the operations or functions or properties that you can call on or return from a particular string. Okay, so I'd encourage you to do, now that we've covered the 6 basic types that we'll be encountering often, is to explore some of these examples on your own. So maybe make some examples of integers, floats, doubles, booleans, characters, and strings. See what can and can't be represented by those types. And once you're ready to move on, we can go to the next section, which will be dealing with operations that we can perform on these variable types.